Hey, have you ever wondered how a strong, independent woman in New York City could get caught in a vicious web of deception that almost destroyed her life, all for the sake of love? I know it sounds hard to believe, but this is my true story. My name is Emily. It's not just a cautionary tale, but a vivid testament to courage and the ability to rise from the ashes. You'll see, New York City ain't just sparkling dreams. It's also got these shadow lovers who can turn your life into a nightmare. Alright, so I'm Emily. Still me, still living in Tribeca, New York City. But things are definitely not the same anymore. That fateful day I met Nate at the coffee shop. I thought I'd found a dream. Now, it's turning into a full-blown nightmare. Damn Monday. I remember thinking that, staring at the mountain of design layouts on my desk in my Tribeca penthouse. 28, making it on my own as a creative in the city that never sleeps. My folks? Yeah, they're well off, but I never leaned on that. I built my own damn career. Anyway, that Monday felt different. Little did I know, it was the calm before the Category 5 hurricane named Nate blew into my life. I was grabbing my usual overpriced latte at that cute little downtown spot, you know? And then this guy bumps into me, spilling my drink all over my favorite vintage blazer. Annoying? You bet. But then I looked up, and damn, this wasn't your typical clumsy New Yorker. This dude had this rugged charm, like he just stepped off a motorcycle after a cross-country trip. And those eyes? Hypnotic. He apologized profusely, like his life depended on it, then offered to buy me a new blazer. A good one, he emphasized. And suddenly, my crappy Monday looked a whole lot brighter. That's how I met Nate. He wasn't from New York, he told me. Moved here to chase big business dreams, something in tech. Just need the right capital, he'd always say, with this hopeful look that made you want to root for him. We started talking, and hours just flew by. He was funny, adventurous, and seemed genuinely interested in my crazy creative world. It was refreshing, you know? Most guys I met in this city were either too jaded or too focused on their own hustle to really see you. Nate? He saw me. One thing that stood out right away was how interested he was in my life. Not in a creepy way at first. He wanted to know everything. My work, my friends, even my family. He asked about my parents, what they did, all that. I didn't think much of it at the time. Just making conversation, right? But looking back, well, that was an Empire State Building-sized red flag. Our dates were like something out of a movie. Romantic dinners at secret Brooklyn spots, spontaneous trips to art galleries, even a weekend getaway upstate where we hiked and talked under the stars. He made me feel special, like I was the only woman in the world. And the sex? Oh my God. To put it mildly, it was mind-blowing. I was falling, and I was falling fast. Then, the little things started happening. Subtle at first. He'd mention how great my apartment renovation would be, its potential. Or he'd joke about how he wished he had my eye when I was redecorating my place. And then came the investment suggestions. You know, Emily, with your family's background, there are some incredible opportunities I'm looking into. He never pushed, never pressured, but the seeds were planted. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Nate started getting more involved. He'd offer to help me with bills, insisting he wanted to cover me. Sweet at first. But then it became more frequent, more expected. He started giving opinions on how I should manage my money, suggesting safer investments, usually ones he seemed to be involved with somehow. Remember that vintage blazer he spilled coffee on? He bought me a new one. A super expensive designer piece. It was a generous gesture, sure. But then he started borrowing it. Then other clothes of mine. And then he just moved some of his stuff into my apartment. It felt natural almost. Like we were taking a step. But looking back, it was like a slow, calculated takeover. My friends started raising eyebrows. He's just always around you, Em, my best friend, Chloe, said one night over cocktails. And all he talks about is his big opportunity. Another friend, Liam, a finance whiz, casually asked me about Nate's investment ideas. When I tried to explain, even I realized how vague and nonsensical they sounded. One evening, I came home earlier than usual after a photo shoot. Nate was on his laptop, looking at something. He quickly closed the screen when he saw me. Just checking emails, he said. A little too quickly. But I'd seen it. Just a glimpse. A website. For dating wealthy women. My gut clenched. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe it was an ad. Maybe I imagined it. But a seed of doubt was planted, and it started growing like crazy. I began paying closer attention. The way he subtly steered conversations to my family's wealth. The way he was always cash-strapped. His constant talk about just needing a little more capital to make his dreams happen. It all started clicking, like pieces of a truly horrifying puzzle. Then I remembered something. Weeks earlier, he'd gotten a call. He stepped onto the balcony to take it, but I overheard a bit. She's loaded. Almost got her. He'd laughed it off later, saying it was just business with a difficult client. But now, it sounded completely different. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was incredibly wrong. The charming, ambitious man I'd fallen for. Was he just playing me? Was I just another mark? The thought made me sick to my stomach. The moment I saw that suspicious website on Nate's computer, I couldn't sleep. The feeling of being deceived was eating at me, and I knew I couldn't just let it go. I started digging. Not to find immediate incriminating evidence, but to validate my gut feeling. And you know what? In his nightstand drawer, I found a spare wallet. Empty. Just a beat-up old driver's license from another state. And the name on it wasn't Nate. It said David Miller. My heart pounded like it was trying to escape my chest. Nate was David Miller? Or was David Miller Nate? The next few days, I was walking on eggshells. Nate was still sweet, still generous, but in my eyes, he'd morphed into a terrifying ghost. He kept subtly suggesting investments. And now, he started asking for larger sums of money, for opportunities he said were can't miss. One time, he asked to borrow 50 grand. Just for a week, baby, to close this deal, he said, his eyes gleaming. I made excuses about being busy, but he didn't give up. He started bringing up the gifts he'd given me, referring to our love like it was a burden, an obligation to be repaid. It wasn't love anymore. It was a transaction. I started watching him discreetly. When he said he was meeting partners, I'd sneakily check his phone's location. He'd left it home once. And would you believe it? He wasn't at some office at all. He was at a fancy hotel in Midtown. Alone. When I probed subtly, Nate's brow furrowed. What's wrong, Emily? Don't you trust me? He asked, his voice turning cold. That was the first time I saw that terrifying look in his eyes. It wasn't a lover's. It was an enemy's. I immediately called Chloe. I spilled everything, from the coffee spill to the fake ID. Chloe, always strong and practical, said one thing. Emily, we need to find out who this guy is. Right now. Chloe had a friend who was a private investigator, specialized in messy divorces, but also had experience with fraud investigations. His name was Leo. When I sat across from Leo in a small, dim office in Hell's Kitchen, telling him my story, he just nodded. Sounds familiar, Miss Emily, he said. Looks like you're dating a real con artist. Leo got to work. A few days later, he called me. His voice was more serious than usual. Emily, I've got some news. And it's not good. I held my breath. Leo explained. You're Nate. He doesn't just have one fake name. The name Nate Davies is an alias. His real name is David Miller. And he doesn't have any business dreams. He's a professional con artist. A high-end gold digger. But that wasn't all. Leo found Nate's, or David's, records in several other states. Florida, California, and there was always a pattern. Wealthy, single women charmed by his suave exterior and empty promises. And then, the real shock hit. Leo sent me an old newspaper article. It was about a woman in Miami who lost almost her entire fortune to a brilliant young entrepreneur, a guy with Nate's exact face, but a different name. She'd been ruined financially, her reputation trashed, and she'd fallen into a deep depression. That woman, looking at her picture, I saw myself. I felt like I was going to throw up. He didn't just want my money. He wanted to destroy my life, just like he'd done to those other women. Anger surged through me, hot and cold at the same time. I couldn't let him do that. I decided not to confront Nate immediately. I had to plan. If he was a pro, I had to act like a spy. Leo coached me on how to set up hidden cameras in my apartment, how to record conversations without him knowing, and most importantly, how to pretend like nothing was wrong. Nate seemed to sense something was off. He became more irritable, more prone to outbursts. He started checking in on me more frequently. Where are you going? Who are you talking to? He tried to control my calls, my texts. One time, he just showed up at my office unannounced. He stood outside watching. I pretended to be cheerful, but inside, I was ice cold. He was watching me. He knew I was suspicious. The cat and mouse game had begun. Meanwhile, Leo kept digging. He found another woman, in California, who was also a victim of Nate David, but she'd fought back, and she'd won, though it came at a high cost. Leo arranged a video call between us. The woman's name was Sarah. She looked at me through the screen, her eyes full of understanding and pain. He won't stop, Emily, she said, her voice hoarse. He'll take everything from you, then leave you with nothing but wreckage. Sarah had lost almost $2 million, and her faith in love. But she also gave me a glimmer of hope. She'd gathered enough evidence to go to the police, and Nate almost ended up in jail. I started collecting evidence, recording his requests for money, his empty promises, taking pictures of his stuff in my apartment as proof that he was living off me, documenting his texts, his emails. I had to be so careful. One night, as I was secretly copying data from Nate's phone to a backup drive, he suddenly walked into the living room. He stared at me. What are you doing? His voice was ice. My heart stopped. My whole body stiffened. I tried to keep calm, putting the phone down. Just looking at some old pictures of us, I said, forcing a smile. He looked at me for a long time, his eyes scrutinizing, then finally went into the bedroom. I exhaled, my back drenched in sweat. I almost got caught. Despite the fear, I kept going. I had to make everything seem normal. I even actively brought up his investments, pretending to be interested. He got so excited, not knowing that every word he said was being carefully recorded by me. He even started planning to invest a portion of my family's trust fund, something I never would have allowed. Leo discovered that Nate had a secret offshore bank account. That's where he funneled money from his victims. This made it even harder to trace. Then, he suggested we move into a bigger, more luxurious apartment. "We need more space for our future, baby," he said, his eyes gleaming with a greedy look. He even said he'd put my name on the lease, but the rent and other expenses would be paid from my funds. He was tightening the noose. I knew I couldn't drag this out forever. I needed a final plan. A trap. I told Nate I'd convinced my parents to release a significant portion of my trust fund to invest in his project. His eyes lit up. I knew I had him hooked. "Here's the next part of your story, New Yorker style." Nate immediately started hounding me to set up a meeting with my family lawyer to finalize the paperwork. I just smirked to myself. Family lawyer? Nah, I had Leo. Leo played the part. We set up a fake meeting at a rented law office. Everything was prepped. Fake documents, investment contracts that sounded legit but were really designed to trap every word Nate said. And most importantly, everything was secretly recorded, video and audio. Nate walked into that meeting like he owned the place, radiating confidence. He didn't suspect a thing. He thought he'd won. He started blabbing about his business plan, about the massive profits, about how lucky I was to have him. When Leo slid over the investment contract, Nate signed it right away, barely even reading it. He even bragged about how he'd convinced me to trust him. Every word, every gesture of his was captured. I got chills listening to him. After the meeting, Nate threw a huge party at my apartment to celebrate our success. He invited all his shady friends, guys I'd never even met. He was celebrating too soon, clueless that he was digging his own grave. At the party, while Nate was wasted, bragging to some buddy about the big fish he'd just reeled in, I stood nearby, my phone recording. He said some disgusting, blasphemous things about me and my family. "Dumb rich folks," he spat. Just a few sweet words and they spill their guts. I looked at him, and pure revulsion swelled up. He wasn't human. He was a monster. It was time to end this. Right after the party, I sent all the evidence, the recordings, the videos, the fake documents he'd signed, the files on his other victims, to Leo. I also sent a copy to the NYPD and the FBI, along with a detailed letter explaining everything. The next morning, while Nate was still passed out cold from the party, I quietly packed my personal stuff. Just the essentials. My heart was pounding, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from a coming sense of liberation. I left a note for him on the pillow. Just a short line. "Game over, Nate. Or should I call you David?" I didn't wait for him to wake up. I knew he'd be furious. As I stepped out of the apartment door, Leo called. "Everything's ready, Emily. We filed the paperwork. Now it's just a matter of time." I took a deep breath of that New York air. For the first time in months, I felt free. But things didn't end that easily. Nate found the letter. He blew up my phone. Dozens of calls, threatening texts. He swore he'd ruin my reputation, threatened to expose my personal secrets if I dared to do anything to him. He knew about my family, about my connections. I changed my number, locked down all my social media accounts. I even had to temporarily move into a safe apartment Leo arranged. The fear was still there, lingering like a ghost. The cops started their investigation. They had enough evidence. He just vanished. Vanished without a trace. Like he'd never even existed. His secret bank accounts were emptied. He'd bolted. Leo told me, "He won't dare come back to New York, Emily. He knows the cops are looking for him, but he'll find new prey somewhere else." A few weeks later, I got an unmarked envelope. Inside was an old photo of me and Nate laughing and happy. The back of the photo just had one line, scrawled by hand. "Game's not over, baby. I'll be back." My whole body trembled. He was still watching me. I lived in fear for a long time. Opening my apartment door, I'd always look around. The phone ringing would make me jump. I saw his shadow everywhere. On the bus, in the crowd, in my dreams. Chloe and Liam, my friends, were there for me the whole time. They helped me get through it. But I knew this scar would never fully heal. It changed me forever. It's been 3 years since all that went down. Nate never came back, or at least, he never showed his face to me. But that threat still haunts me. I still have to live with the question. Should I go public with my story? I've got all the evidence. I could tell my story, warn other women. But if I do, will he come back? Will he try to get revenge? That fear always battled with the desire for release. Finally, I decided to tell it. Not to out Nate, but to speak my truth. to let other women know they're not alone, to let other people know that guys like Nate exist, and we need to protect each other. I wrote a small, anonymous book. It chronicled my journey, from being deceived to finally freeing myself. I wanted it to be a warning, a beacon for anyone lost in the dark. The biggest lesson I learned? Trust is fragile. Never put all your faith in someone you don't truly know. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. And most importantly, no matter who you are, how much money you have, you can still be a victim. But you don't have to suffer alone. There are always people ready to help you. People who will fight alongside you. My story doesn't have a fairy tale ending. I didn't meet some new prince. But I got my life back. I found an inner strength I never knew I had. Nate might have taken some of my money and left a big scar on my soul. But he couldn't take away my freedom, my independence, or my ability to trust myself. So if you're hearing this story and you're feeling like something's not right in your relationship, listen to your gut. Never doubt your own instincts. Get help. Talk to friends, family, or professionals. Don't let fear control your life. Nate was a shadow lover. He lived in the dark corners of deceit. But now, I've stepped into the light. And I'll never let anyone pull me back into the darkness again. After everything that happened, I thought I was free from the nightmare of Nate, or David, or whatever other fake name he used. I wrote the anonymous book, trying to warn others. But you know what? His shadow just lingered, persistent like a curse. One time, I was walking in Central Park, beautiful day, birds chirping. I suddenly saw a familiar figure, tall, rugged, sitting on a bench looking out at the lake. My heart stopped. It was Nate. I froze, my breath hitched. Then the person turned around. It wasn't him, just a guy with a similar build. I started crying right there in the park, from relief and from the fear that was still so real. That obsession haunted me for months. Every strange phone call, every fleeting shadow of a person, made me jump. I lost sleep constantly, living in a state of high alert. My apartment, once a safe haven, now felt like a cage. Then one morning, I got an email. Strange address, no sender name. The subject line was just blank. I hesitated, but then curiosity won out. When I opened it, it was a photo. My apartment. From the outside. Taken from the street. My living room window was slightly open, and my blurry silhouette was inside. No message, nothing else. Just a picture. He was still watching me. I immediately called Leo. He reassured me, saying it was probably a nasty prank or some creep, but I knew it was Nate. Only he could haunt me like that. I installed a top-of-the-line security system in my apartment. Every door, every window had sensors. I even hired a tech expert to sweep all my electronic devices, looking for any spyware. And you know what? He'd installed a GPS tracking app on my phone, hidden as a harmless game. He'd been tracking me the whole time. That feeling of being violated, of being watched, was horrifying. I felt like my private space had been completely taken away. I didn't dare go anywhere alone anymore, always needing Chloe or Liam with me. My family, after knowing the whole truth, was completely shocked and heartbroken. My mom almost fainted. My dad, a man of steel, couldn't hide his disappointment and anger. They offered to have me move back home, live under their protection. But I refused. I needed to face this on my own. I couldn't live forever in the shadow of fear. Leo advised me to go to therapy. At first, I thought I didn't need it. I was strong Emily, right? But then I realized I couldn't get through this alone. I needed professional help. The first therapy session, I cried like a baby. Tears just poured out, uncontrollable. I recounted everything, from the initial romance to the cruel deception. My therapist, an older, kind woman, just listened. Then she said something that stunned me. Emily, you weren't just a victim of financial fraud. You were a victim of emotional abuse. I never thought I was abused, but she was right. Nate had manipulated, controlled, and destroyed my trust. That was abuse. Realizing that helped me begin the healing process. Writing my anonymous book was part of that therapy process. Every word I wrote was a weight lifted. I wrote about the fake happy moments, the sweet lies, and the absolute heartbreak when the truth was exposed. Some nights, I couldn't type a single word, just sat staring at the screen, tears streaming down my face. A memory suddenly flooded back. Nate once told me about his mother. He said she abandoned him when he was little, and he had to struggle to survive. He used that story to gain my sympathy, and I believed him. But when I told Leo the details of that story, he scoffed. Emily, that's a classic con artist trick. Create a tragic past to play on the victim's compassion. He used that trick on Sarah and those other women too. I was disgusted. He was a monster with no limits. My book was published online discreetly. I didn't heavily promote it, just wanted it to reach the people who truly needed it. And then, unexpected things started to happen. I started getting emails. Not from Nate, but from other women. Women who had read my book. Hi, Emily. I don't know your real name, but I went through something similar. His name was... And they were different names, but the stories were identical. One of them, a woman named Maria from Texas, said she was also conned by a guy who matched my description exactly. His name was Mark Thompson. Maria lost a multi-million-dollar ranch. When Maria sent me a picture of Mark Thompson, I almost collapsed. It was Nate. Him exactly. Just with a slightly thicker beard. He was still continuing his con artist life, in another state, with another name, and a new victim. The anger flared up in me again. Not just for myself, but for Maria and all the other women. I couldn't let him keep doing this. I connected with Maria. We had a video call that lasted for hours. We shared our experiences, our pain, and our outrage. And then, we realized something terrifying. Nate wasn't acting alone. He had an accomplice. Maria recounted that another man frequently appeared with her Mark Thompson, a mysterious man, who seemed to be his advisor. This person always accompanied Nate in important meetings, and seemed to be the mastermind behind many of the more complex schemes. Leo immediately started investigating this accomplice. He dug into the offshore bank accounts Nate had used. And then, he found an anonymous IP address that repeatedly accessed those accounts. That IP address wasn't from the US. It was from an Eastern European country. This made the whole story bigger, scarier. Nate wasn't just a lone gold digger. He was part of an international network. I felt a terrible weight on my shoulders. This game wasn't just mine anymore. I wasn't just fighting for myself, but for Maria, and for all the other women who had been hurt by Nate and his crew. Here's the next section of your story, infused with that New York City voice. I decided to step completely out of the shadows. I was going to go public with my story, with my real name. And I was going to team up with Maria and the other victims to work with the cops, bring this whole damn thing into the light. I reached out to a well-known investigative reporter at the New York Times. She was super interested in my story. We met up, and I handed over all the evidence I had. The recordings, photos, documents, and all the info on Maria and the other victims. The article dropped. It was a massive piece, front page of the New York Times. Headline: The Shadow Suitor, Portrait of a Serial Manipulator. My story, under my real name, Emily Thorne, was out there. Immediately, my phone started blowing up. Hundreds of calls, texts from strangers. Most of them were supportive, cheering me on. But there were also new anonymous threats. You'll pay, one text read. Game's not over. This time, I wasn't scared like before. I had my friends, my family, Leo, and hundreds of other women backing me up. I wasn't alone. Thanks to the article, the police and the FBI reopened the investigation, but on a much bigger scale. They were in touch with me constantly, asking for more info. Maria and the other victims also started speaking up, providing more evidence. A massive scam network was slowly being exposed. A few months later, some shocking news hit the papers. Nate's accomplice had been arrested in an Eastern European country thanks to the IP address Leo had found. That was a huge breakthrough. Still no word on Nate. He was still in hiding. But with his accomplice busted, and his network slowly being exposed, I knew his day of reckoning wasn't far off. My life completely changed. I was still doing my creative work, but now, I was also an advocate, a voice for fraud victims. I regularly shared my story on forums, at small talks. One of the hardest things was learning to trust again. Especially in new relationships. Every time a new guy came into my life, I'd wonder, is he like Nate? Is he wearing a mask? I had to learn to balance being cautious with being cynical. But I learned that not everyone is a Nate. There are still good people out there. And I deserve to be loved. To be trusted again. The scar Nate left will never fully heal. It's a painful reminder. But it's also a reminder of my strength, of my resilience. I survived. I fought. And I won. In my own way. The biggest takeaway? Never judge a book by its cover. And never let anyone convince you that you're not worth it, not worthy of happiness. True happiness doesn't come from sweet talk or flashy gifts. It comes from trust, respect, and sincerity. Something Nate never had. I still live in New York. Still love this crazy, noisy city. But now, I live with my eyes wider open, my heart stronger, and a resolve to never let any shadow suitor drag me into their game again. And if you're listening to this, I want you to know this. You are not alone. If you're in a similar situation, get help. Speak up. Fight. Because you deserve to be free, to live an authentic life, not hidden in anyone's shadow. After my story dropped in the New York Times, my life felt like it turned a page, but it also brought unexpected challenges. I thought I was safe, but the ghost of Nate, or David, or Mark, or whatever name he used, still lingered. A week after the article came out, I got this massive bouquet of white roses, delivered right to my apartment. No card, no sender, white roses. That's what Nate gave me on our first date. My heart hammered. He was still out there somewhere. He knew where I lived. The fear I thought was dormant surged back. I beefed up my apartment security again, wouldn't go out alone. Every strange car parked outside made my heart jump. Leo had to keep reassuring me, saying it could be a psychological play, a way for him to assert his presence. I decided I wouldn't let fear control me anymore. I went to see a cybersecurity expert. She showed me ways to protect my personal info online, how to spot signs of being tracked virtually. I changed all my passwords, deleted unnecessary data, and became super careful with everything I shared on social media. During this process, I realized another terrifying thing. Many of the dating or business networking apps Nate introduced me to were actually tools he used to gather intel on me and others. He didn't just con with words. He used tech to build victim profiles. He was a master of social engineering. I had unknowingly handed him way too much info about myself, my family, my friends. Other victims started reaching out to me more. We formed a private online support group. There was Maria from Texas, Sarah from California, and now Linda from Florida, Kevin from Chicago. Nate conned men too. Each person had a different story, but they all had the same guy who ruined their lives. And what was crazy, many of them also received white roses, or similar cryptic messages after Nate disappeared. He wanted all of us to live in fear, never to forget him. We started sharing info about the fake bank accounts, the aliases he used, the places he'd been seen. We even created a detailed Nate David Mark profile as best we could, hoping it would help the cops. One day, Leo called me. His voice sounded tense. "Emily, we found something." He sent me an audio recording. It was a phone conversation between Nate and another man. They were discussing a new scam, but what was terrifying was, they mentioned my name. That Emily girl was a bit stubborn. Nate's voice echoed, cold and dismissive. But she also gave us a valuable lesson. Next time, we'll be more careful. He wasn't just unremorseful. He saw me as a lesson to get better. Hearing his voice, I felt a surge of anger in my throat. But this time, I didn't tremble. I was strong enough to turn that anger into action. I sent the recording to the FBI. They said it was critical evidence, showing Nate's intent to continue his crimes and implicating his network. I realized this fight wouldn't just end with him getting caught. It was a long game to expose this entire sophisticated scam system. I started getting invites to workshops, panels on fraud prevention. At first, I hesitated. Stand in front of a crowd and tell my painful story? But then I thought of Maria, Sarah, Linda, Kevin, and all the others. I had to do this for them. The first time I stood on stage in front of hundreds of people, my hands were shaking. But as I started to speak every word, every syllable, the fear slowly vanished, replaced by a strange power. I didn't just tell my story. I talked about the warning signs, the psychological tricks con artists use. I spoke about the importance of trusting your gut, of thoroughly checking information, and of never letting anyone isolate you from your friends and family. During one panel, a young woman stood up, tears welling in her eyes. "Emily," she said, "I'm dating a man exactly like you described. I think I'm being scammed. You saved me." In that moment, I knew all the suffering I'd been through had meaning. My story had saved another person from becoming a victim. That was my biggest win. My life slowly returned to normal. I was still doing my design work, still living in my beloved Tribeca apartment. But now, I lived with a clearer purpose. I wasn't haunted by Nate coming back anymore. Instead, I focused on creating a community of survivors, a network of mutual support. Together, we tracked news about scams, shared the latest warnings. The FBI also informed us they were very close to apprehending Nate. The evidence I and the other victims provided had helped them build a strong case. One day, I got a call from Leo. He didn't say much, just, "Emily, we got him." My heart constricted. After all these years, Nate was finally caught. I felt a mix of emotions. No extreme joy, no gloating. Just a deep sense of relief, like a huge burden had been lifted. Nate was arrested in a small European city, where he was trying to pull off a new scam. He was extradited back to the US to face a long list of charges: fraud, money laundering, and emotional abuse. I didn't go to his trial. I didn't want to see him anymore. I wanted to close this chapter of my life. He was convicted. A long sentence. I didn't care how long he served. The important thing was he couldn't hurt anyone else. And I played a part in that. Life goes on. I learned to trust again, little by little. Not blindly, but with caution and understanding. I found new love. A kind, genuine man who accepts me with all my scars. I realized that even though Nate took a priceless part of my life, he unintentionally gave me a gift. That was strength, resilience, and the ability to rise from the ashes. My shadow suitor story might have ended with Nate held accountable, but the lesson learned remains. Always listen to your instincts, seek help when needed, and most importantly, never let anyone extinguish the light within you. Because in the end, light will always defeat darkness. And you listening to this story, you are that light. Be yourself, be strong, and protect yourself.